and welcome back to the No Score Review Show, where we have in-depth critique and nuanced discussion of some of the latest movies, television, and video games. I am your host, Nick Green, and today we are jumping back into the MCU with their latest feature film releasing into theaters, The Marvels, starring Brie Larson, Teyonah Parris, and Iman Vellani, and Samuel L. Jackson as well.
Yeah, of course.
And joining me today, once again, is Zach Milne from Zach Milne Talks Movies on YouTube. Welcome back, Zach.
What's up? Happy to be here, man. So glad, so stoked to talk some more Marvel with you, Nick. I'm super happy.
I'm glad to have you back on the show. It's been a minute, like we said before we started the recording. But I am very excited to talk about this one because of how kind of divisive it is.
Oh yeah.
It's getting a lot of divisive reviews. Lots of people are really liking it. Lots of people are hating it. Lots of people are hating it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm
I'm
excited to get into it. Yeah. The first little bit of this review will be spoiler free, so worry not. We won't be going into any explicit plot details or like post-credit scene stuff or anything like that. We'll just kind of start with our general thoughts and kind of our expectations going in. And I imagine we might kind of go on a rant of kind of how divisive this film is.
Well, we haven't talked about it at all, so I have no idea how you're feeling about it.
Yeah,
and I'm super excited to kind of
going
just,
in
get
blind
into it.
Yeah. But Zach, we'll start with you. What kind of were your expectations going into this one, and what were your kind of general thoughts coming out of it?
Yeah, expectations going in. I mean, I keep up with all the behind the scenes stuff and everything going on in the trades and insiders talk about this and that. So I heard about how much problems behind the scenes this was having.
Mm-hmm.
I was supposed to come out in July originally. I believe it was July originally, and then they pushed it to November. And a lot of the talk was like, "Oh, reshoots. They're trying to fix this. They're trying to fix that." A lot of that kind of stuff. Then that Variety article came out and was like, Nia DaCosta, the director, she left for the last 2 weeks of shooting the film, which is so odd. Just kind of like this hit piece against her a little bit, which
right.
I believe she gave an interview and was like, yeah, because they needed to do reshoots and do this, and I had other obligations. I have contracts. I have other projects that I need to do.
Schedules and stuff.
So I feel like this movie was kind of being targeted a little bit even before it was released. The trailers came out. They looked fun. They looked enjoyable. That's kind of all I was really expecting going into the movie. Was it was going to be fun. It was going to be enjoyable. I loved Miss Marvel. I loved that series on Disney Plus. I love Kamala Khan. Was really looking forward to seeing her on the big screen along with her family, of course. And coming out of the movie, well, first of all, I'll talk about the first reactions because people came out of the movie, specifically like some of the bigger guys that I watched, like Christian Harloff, Dan Murrell. I'm sure if you guys have watched shows like this, you guys know who those people are. They were like pretty rough on, especially Dan Murrell. I believe Dan Murrell said stuff like he can't believe that this was even put out, that it was released.
I was so blown away by his reaction.
It was vitriol. Like it was intense. So I was watching these reviews. Usually I don't watch reviews before I do my own review, but I was very, very curious about the Marvels. So I would watch a review that would be like, this is an unfinished film. This is like terrible. This is Marvel's worst. Can't believe they put this out. Then I would go to the next film that was on the suggested feed and it'd be like, this was great. I had so much fun. I love the story. I love the characters. And it was like, these people have literally seen 2 different movies. I have no idea what to expect going in.
Right.
So then I went in, and coming out of the movie, I liked it.
Okay.
It's a poor film. Especially like in Marvel, I think it's poor.
Okay.
But it's fun. It's fun. Which I know is like probably the most generic term that's been thrown out there about this movie. Right. It's fun. Don't go in expecting, I would say, like a roller coaster ride. It's not like I was laughing my gut off, the entire time. It has moments for sure. Right. And overall, I would say that I enjoyed it.
Mm. Yeah, I'm very much of the same, and that also is kind of the biggest defense to this movie. Is a lot of people are just like, "What did you expect? It's a Marvel movie. Like, just go in for a fun popcorn time." I had a fun time. Sure, the villain was bad, and like the pacing was horrible, and it was edited to like garbage. But it was a fun time, and the cast was great and everything. And like, while I do understand that sentiment, I can completely understand like just how poor of a film it is and how much wrong with it there was. Luckily, speaking to kind of expectations, I think aside from the push and release, I would think I was pretty dark, and like the trailers and stuff, I was pretty much in the dark on any of the like behind the scenes details.
Mhm.
Um, I typically nowadays with these types of films, I'm not as unless it gets a huge boost in like media buzz and whatnot, and it's just unavoidable. Um, I usually am like steering pretty clear of the type of stuff just because I want to try and go in as blind as possible. And I don't know what it was about this specific movie because aside from Guardians, the last few movies have been pretty like middling to bad overall for me,
Okay.
in the MCU at least. And I've been pretty critical and like nervous of about the like trajectory of the MCU, and especially with all the shows coming out as well and the kind of quality of those.
Yeah.
I I don't know what it was with this one, but I went in just like not really expecting anything at all. That like I think I watched the trailer a couple times, like just from being at the theater, and I was like, it was a very MCU cookie cutter trailer, like playing Beastie Boys
Did
in
you
the
see
trailer,
the
right?
final trailer? Did you see the final trailer that they
No, and
released?
I specifically avoided that one
Okay.
because of what I heard about it.
I will tell everybody out there that maybe hasn't seen the film yet, but watch that final trailer. It's bull crap. That whole
Yeah,
final trailer,
dude, I
bull
don't
crap.
it completely reads as like one last final push to be like, please go see the
Yep.
movie, right?
Here's the
Like,
thing though. Here's the thing. The first couple trailers, I feel like my expectations for what this movie was going to be fit with those first couple trailers,
I
right?
think I
And
agree.
then
Yeah.
Marvel had to go and drop this final trailer, and then my expectations grew because it's like we got a new
Yeah.
Thanos voiceover. Like, oh, there'll always be someone to carry on my work. What does that mean? Oh, they're coming through. Crazy stuff. Oh, what does that mean? Nothing,
Yeah.
because it's
If
not there.
yeah, it well, and you see Tony, you see Cap, you
Yep,
like you just like they skyrocket the expectations, and
bull
like
crap. It's
that
just all
just
bull.
like yeah, it does nothing but hinder the film. It harms like any sort of last bit of audience enthusiasm you're trying to like
Hmm.
inject into this movie, and it's like what was that all about? And that's I mean yeah, we could go on a whole rant about like movie trailers and like teasers and the
Yeah.
marketing behind
That's
all
one of
of
the
these
worst ones I've
movies.
seen. That's one of the most deceitful ones I've ever
No
seen. I'm
kidding,
just
yeah.
gonna say it right here.
I'm glad I didn't like see it at all, and just kind of avoided it because that would have been yeah, probably would have agreed with you. Um but yeah, like I don't know what it was, man. I went in expecting pretty much nothing other than what I saw from the trailer, and I came out like I don't know why the like because these are pretty objective problems, I would say, of like the script and the editing of the film and pacing. The
Hmm.
villain is just as like among the worst of the MCU
There was a
villains.
villain.
Exactly, right?
What? I don't
Like
remember any villain. Yeah, she's
um
forgettable. She's so
yeah,
forgettable.
so forgettable. It's a Ronin clone basically, but
Ronan was better. I liked Ronan. That's like one of my like hot takes of the MCU is I like the
oh,
Ronan villain
okay.
quite a bit.
Interesting. Interesting. Um but yeah, like none of that really bothered me or like was anything I really picked up on during the film. Like I was pretty maybe it was cuz the other thing too is this is the shortest MCU film like
Yep.
in
Oh, you
history
feel it.
now.
It's breezy.
Yeah, and that was actually something that kind of maybe amped up my enthusiasm. I'm like, "Oh, hell yeah, an hour and 45 minutes? I'm there, baby. Let's do this."
After
And
Killers of the Flower Moon, I needed it.
yeah. Yeah, but yeah, nothing really bothered me that much. Like there were those uh pretty standard like MCU problems with many of their films anyways. Um but like I think what sold me was just the fun tone, the
Hmm.
trio uh of cast members had a great chemistry and I think they carried the film, Iman Vellani in particular, like everyone's saying.
Yeah.
Um and there's just like I think they really take advantage because that's something they advertise in the trailers a lot is the swapping places like concept,
Yeah.
right? I think that was handled pretty well.
For
throughout
the
the
most part,
film.
I would agree with you. Yep.
Yeah. And there's just some pretty cool creative stuff. And maybe it is because the bar has been kind of brought down a few pegs with the last few projects, like Guardians aside. But I don't know. I came away like really liking it. It was a pleasant surprise. It
Yeah.
like I've kind of the headline label I would use is it's like probably my second favorite MCU film behind Guardians since No Way Home,
Nice.
I would say.
Whoa, wow! Since No Way Home, I'm looking at my
Yeah,
collection right now.
like
That's actually a big statement right there.
yeah, like all of last year's films, Thor, Doctor Strange, even Black Panther, like kind of looking back on my review on Black Panther, like I would say I had a more enjoyable time with this one. Black Panther does kind of get that caveat of like the whole context behind that film and already kind of having an uphill battle, but
Yeah.
I don't know. I enjoyed it.
Well, when I came out of the theater, one of the things I said was this movie. The best analogy that I can use to describe how this movie felt to me, and I'm not saying this like I know there was a script. I know that people actually wrote stuff down, but
Yeah,
it felt
right.
like they wrote bullet points and then just
Right.
decided to go shoot it.
Yeah.
Like, okay, this is gonna happen. This is gonna happen. This is the connection to this person. Okay, let's go shoot that. Like that's kind of how it felt. But like,
Right.
are we gonna flesh it out? Nope.
No.
And
We don't have time.
yeah, with the Marvels themselves, like Captain Marvel, Ms. Marvel, Professor
Professor
Marvel,
Marvel?
they never really landed on it.
No.
I honestly don't know. We all calling her Photon, but apparently it's
Right.
Professor Marvel.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
I will go as far to say that they are the band-aid of this movie.
Yeah, I
They
would
are the
agree.
thing that makes this movie look like it's okay. But if you take
Yeah,
that band-aid off, whew, it's got quite the wound.
very big star. Yeah, for sure. For sure. I would agree. Um, yeah, I like it's a weird kind of topic to discuss of like your expectations going into the film, and it's not
Mhm.
even a sort of statement you can kind of sweep everything away of like just go in expecting like a nothing hollow cookie cutter popcorn film that's fun, or like you get what you put into it. So if you're going in expecting a good story, then you might not. But like, or like you just no expectations at all in terms of any sort of details. You're just hoping for a good movie. That's what I hoped for, but that's also what like Dan Merle hoped for, and we both
Yeah.
came out with wildly different like
It's crazy.
reviews and thoughts, right? Like just as like an aside for like Dan Merle, he's the like one reviewer I like one big reviewer I tend to regularly watch, and like
Yeah.
he's pretty not like conservative, but like he's usually very nuanced with
Mhm.
his Marvel takes. I find anyway. Like there's a lot of problems with the movies that he finds and the shows and everything that I tend to agree with, but then there's also some like flip side too, like some positives. But the Marvels, he was very negative, and maybe it was just
Yeah.
like the straw that broke the camel's back or something, but very, very interesting.
It
So,
was
so
surprising, but,
surprising.
like, I love Dan Murrow. I don't wanna throw any shade at Dan
No,
Murrow.
no, no, no,
Like,
no,
he's
no
very
shade
great
at
at what he
all.
does. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I completely agree with a couple, like a large part of what he says with the film. It's just, for some reason, the viewing I had, all of that kind of washed over me. And I just came away being like, that was a fun time.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Um, but yeah, I guess that's probably a good spot to leave our spoiler free review.
Well, quickly,
Um,
I do wanna get your thoughts on this.
sure. Yeah.
Have you watched Miss Marvel? Have you watched WandaVision? Did you watch those shows?
Yes, I have. Yes.
Do you think this works for people who haven't?
That's another thing too, is like it's kind of hard to even kind of conceptualize when you have those preconceived notions and
Mhm.
like all of that kind of backstory, right? You
Yeah.
kind of go in and you're probably a lot more forgiving of some of the story beats and exposition that comes up in this film, is because you're like, oh yeah, I'm familiar with all this stuff. um Probably not, I would
Yeah.
say. Like, and even though the film does seem to do a lot of exposition dumping, particularly in
In the
regards
beginning.
to like Monica and Kamala's
Yep.
backstory and everything, um, among other things, I still don't think. it works ultimately. Um, it's like it's not they're not required viewing necessarily, but like I don't know, I think you'll still be lost in this one without that stuff,
Yeah.
and I think it is a detriment to have such integral backstory be kind of relegated to shows, one of which not even being their own show necessarily.
Yeah.
Um, and the
Well,
other thing too, I find with like the show movie connection stuff is like, even if you have watched the shows, I can only imagine there's like a very like microscopic like subsection of the fan base that has actually watched that stuff regularly or recently rather.
yeah.
Cause like I haven't rewatched WandaVision since it came out. I haven't watched
Right.
Miss Marvel since it came out. So it's like there's also going to be stuff left behind for even the people that like have watched those shows, you know? It's a very weird kind of point. What kind of
Yeah.
are your thoughts regarding that whole
Well,
thing?
so I did see this with my brother. He'd seen
Okay.
WandaVision. He hadn't seen Miss Marvel. I asked him about it, and he said he seemed to have followed it fine. So that's
Okay.
one example of someone who has seen half of the shows that this is. There might be a third one in there, but we'll talk about that later. But
Oh yeah.
half of the shows that are involved in this movie. Um, from my perspective, I can't imagine watching this movie without have seen Miss Marvel and WandaVision and like completely being okay with everything. Like just one example that like if you have not watched Miss Marvel, I can't imagine how you take this information. But
Mhm.
Kamala has the Bangled, and there's a scene where they're talking all together, and she says, "Well, the Bangle did transport me through time and space once." And I was like, "Well, I know what that is from the show, but
Totally.
that's a pretty big statement."
People yeah, people are just hang on. Hang on. We can't just breeze past that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Right. Go watch Disney
Uh
Plus.
yeah. That's something where you need like one of the Disney Plus like previously on. You need like a
Yeah.
recap before,
You just need
right?
like a card to come up at the bottom of the screen. Kamala Khan transported back in time in this episode
Yeah.
of Miss like they used to do in the comics. Like if you
Totally.
want to
Yeah,
see
yeah.
this story, watch issue blah 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 blah. Like just do that
Yeah,
in the movies from
for
now on.
sure. And, like, part of me wants to be like, they should just start doing sort of little recaps in, like, the pre-shows or something for the movie or, like, for the, like, theaters and everything, right? But, like, that also isn't a good idea because, like, you shouldn't have to, like, go to this supplementary stuff to understand the movie you're about to watch, right? Like, it should just
Yeah.
be able to stand on its own, um, which also kind of brings up a weird like feeling I had with this film is like I think that might also weirdly have been why I enjoyed it is it felt in terms of kind of like the ending of this film and like the post credit stuff is playing more into larger part of this saga and this like phase of the MCU, but like as a film on its own some of it works as kind of a standalone adventure.
Mm-hmm.
It feels at least more so than some other films have felt in recent years. Um, but again, that's probably also heavily biased towards someone who has seen all of the material, supplementary material, and everything. So, I mean, take that with a grain of salt.
Yeah.
Uh, so yeah, but yeah, that's very interesting. And well, even like with something we'll get into probably soon with spoilers and stuff, another thing happens later in the film with Miss Marvel again, Kamala Khan, that you would be like, hang on, why can she do that now when there was no pre-established thing, right? And even
Mm-hmm.
myself, I was a little confused as to like I couldn't remember if that was touched on in the show or if that was just a brand new thing that came up. Um, but yeah, there's definitely some moments in that film that would leave people behind, I think. Um, Speaking of leaving people behind, we might have to leave some of you behind now because we are going to get into spoilers. So
Nice
if you
transition.
if you haven't seen the film and don't want anything spoiled, then pause this review and come on back once you've seen the film. If you don't care, then stick around because it's going to be all spoiler talk from here on out. So, um, I don't know, highlights, lowlights. Do you want to start positive, negative, what you liked about the film?
Yeah, no. So it's funny. I did my review yesterday,
Mhm.
and I kind of just like came back from the theater, and I was just like, I'm just gonna talk, like I'm just gonna ramble.
Right.
The review like came out to like 30 minutes. I got it edited down to 8, so I talked a lot.
Wow.
And I watched it back, and I was like, I do think I'm coming across maybe a little bit more negative on this than I
Right.
meant to, but there's
Yeah,
still
yeah.
my authentic thoughts. So
Sure.
um there are positives of this movie. I
Mhm.
did, like I said, I did like this movie. I really don't see this movie as being something that you really get that angry about. So I'm actually really surprised that this seems to be the MCU movie that has done that.
Yeah.
Because we kind of touched upon before, like the Marvels, they're great. All their chemistry, especially their power swapping, is a lot of fun in the beginning. It's
Loved
really
that.
fun to. It's visually really interesting,
Totally.
and it's a fun mechanism to get them all together. I think it might have been a little bit clumsy because we'll talk about this, I'm sure. It felt a little inconsistent to me the way that they would use it,
Right.
but it was fun. And another highlight, but also could be a low light, I'm not entirely sure, it depends on how much you care if Secret Invasion is canon or not. I really enjoyed Samuel L. Jackson Nick Fury in this movie. He's just playing it a little bit different, to be
A
generous,
little.
than he was in Secret Invasion.
Dude, it's a complete 180.
it,
It's like
it makes Secret Invasion feel like it takes place like at least 10 years in the future from where he is in the
or in
Marvels,
the past or something because
or in the
yeah,
past,
imagine
maybe.
the tonal whiplash you get if you had like just watched Secret Invasion
Yeah.
and then go to see this movie. It's like we're just making jokes now, I guess. All right.
But
Um
I do give it a little bit of leeway because with COVID and all that stuff, everything got shuffled around. And I'm pretty sure that the Marvels was supposed to come before Secret Invasion. And if
yeah.
that's the case, when you see the last time we saw Nick Fury before the Marvels in that case is the end of Far From Home when he's pretending to be on the beach and he's like, "Where are my shoes?" Like
Yeah.
that feels consistent with this Nick Fury. So if you go
Mhm.
from that to the Marvels, like they might have planned to have done, then it's not as big of a deal. But because you have Secret Invasion in the middle where he's like grizzled and life is beating him down and he leaves
Mhm.
in kind of a somber place, to
Yeah.
see him cracking jokes and yelling black girl magic and stuff is a
Yeah,
little
yeah.
bit jarring
A little
while
bit,
also
yeah.
being fun.
Yeah, exactly. I completely agree. It's there's a little bit of positive and negative there for sure. Um and like yeah, man, it really does suck that this is the reality that we're in with COVID just absolutely screwing over everything obviously, but like
Yeah.
in this particular conversation, the MCU's kind of overall plan. Um yeah. And well, and like they might even be able to kind of give themselves an out if there is somewhere down the line of like an official chronological order in which you watch all of this like post endgame stuff. Because like
Mm.
things like Eternals still is pretty kind of secluded in its own kind of time pocket. It's not it still hasn't been established as to where that
They might
necessarily
never
takes
touch it
place.
again. They might never touch
Exactly.
that movie again. I don't know.
Exactly. So, yeah, maybe some hindsight will give it kind of the benefit of the doubt in maybe it can be kind of placed wherever they need it to be. But yeah, completely agree for sure. Um, yeah, I'll touch on the swapping places stuff real quick. I really like it's probably some of the more creative action sequences we've
Hmm.
gotten with some of the recent entries. I just loved that whole concept. The first fight, while it did have a couple moments of feeling a little too jarring, um, I still overall really liked the whole sequence of following each of them kind of in and out of different environments wherever Carol was or Monica was or Kamala was having
Yeah.
fights taking place in her like the Khan family home was fantastic.
That was probably my
Um
favorite part of the movie.
yeah.
Yeah.
And having the family actually take part in the fight and like beat up the Kree soldiers and everything. That was really funny. Um I think, like speaking of which, some of the like most of the comedy in this actually worked for me. It didn't feel as like quippy. I don't think we did get some like black girl magic and like speaking of Nick Fury, like the oh, it's just Carol when she
That was my
falls to the
favorite.
ground.
That was my
That was
laugh
so
out loud
funny.
moment. The
Yeah,
editing, the timing of
absolutely.
that, and the delivery made that the biggest laugh out loud moment I ever had in
Absolutely.
this movie.
Yeah. Yeah, and then, like, most of Kamala's stuff, I think, worked. There was a couple moments here and there that was like, okay, it didn't quite land for me, like, some of, like, the iPad stuff or,
Mm,
there was,
yeah,
like, "Oh, Captain, My Captain" didn't quite land for me either. There's a couple things, but most of it, worked. I think definitely Kamala was the comedic center point, especially of the
yeah.
trio. I think Monica and Carol got most of the emotional baggage of the trio, and I
The
think
best
that
that
was
you can
handled.
say that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like it's handled pretty sloppily and lazily with like the flashback sequences, which was like a cool concept. I think it just the execution felt like very rushed, like a lot of the
Hmm.
movie does. Um, but I still did appreciate like I the other thing too, like with this film in particular, I like it way more than I did Captain Marvel, the first movie. And in particular, like just Brie Larson's performance, it feels like Brie had way more to work with in this film in terms of emotional
I think
range.
giving her the Marvels to play off of really benefited her character because
Yeah.
it'll because I said this in my review too. Like when you watch the first Captain Marvel, you're looking at a character who lost her memory. She doesn't know who she is. She was fighting. She was brainwashed for the wrong side. She's fighting for the
Hmm.
wrong side. So it's hard for audiences, or I'll speak specifically for myself, to attach to a character who doesn't know who she is and was
Hmm.
brainwashed. So how the heck am I supposed to know who she is and get into her
Yeah.
character? Whereas in the Marvels, and they touch upon it, but it really goes nowhere. That her memory is still gone. She's still trying to like find her memory. She like
Yeah.
briefly says that in the spaceship, and then it's never mentioned again.
Yeah.
Um, but it allows for her personality and more of her true self to come out because
Hmm.
Kamala and Monica kind of pull it out of her.
Yeah.
So I can see what you're saying about that there. I did like her more here, and I liked her in the first film still, but I liked her way more in this film.
I think for me, it is just the most dynamic performance we've gotten out of her. And
Hmm.
like that could be said something in and of itself of like this far in, we're getting that. It feels like she's kind of like both Brie Larson and Carol have been kind of shortchanged ever since
Yeah.
introducing her. Cause like I wasn't crazy about her solo film. And then beyond that, she's basically just shown up to destroy stuff and then bounce, basically.
Yeah,
She's
that's
never
so
really
true.
had much else to do.
She'll crash into a
And then,
spaceship or two, and then she's gone.
exactly, yeah. Like it, even in her second film, it's still an ensemble film. But I mean, for me personally, like some of it still worked, like you said, bouncing off of the other two. Um, yeah, I also agree that like with some other reviews of like seeing how just how chopped up this movie is, seeing how there probably
Hmm.
was a version of a Captain Marvel 2 and it went way more in depth with the whole like memory recovery and her destroying this the what was it, the central intelligence or
Like
whatever
an
of.
AI thing that ran their
Yeah,
plan. I don't remember, dude. It
I
was
rem
something like that. It destroyed their son, I think, because they
yeah.
needed a son.
Well, it was like the she destroyed the intelligence, which then caused the Kree skulls or the Kree like civil war, which destroyed their planet. I don't know.
Can I just say this? The Kree Skull debacle war is like my least favorite thing in the MCU. I
Yeah,
don't get it. I was introduced in Guardians. I kind of followed it a little bit with Ronan, but they carried it on in this film, and I'm just like, what are they negotiating? What's happening right now? Like
it's
it's
too big of a thing for how they have handled it to have
yeah.
handled it well. I think it would have to be like the focus, you know, for it to actually be done well and for any sort of nuance to go into, like in this film as well, the Kree skull scroll. And this is probably some of the more or like some of the most we've seen of it between actual Kree and scrolls. Um, still feels pretty like disposable, honestly. The honestly, the only thing I actually really got out of that was between Kamala and Carol. I really liked that moment where she was like, Kamala was trying to save people, and Carol kind of like tells her to stop and save who you can. And that was like a really cool moment where she like kind of is starting to
Mm-hmm.
learn what it means to be a true hero and everything, right? Um, I do kind of wish this is like kind of one of the lowlights I had. I wish there was more of a dynamic between Carol and Kamala in that sense of like exploring
Yeah.
the kind of the fangirl like idol dynamic and just kind of meeting your heroes and being trained by one of your like not mentors but like just like your idols and everything. I think that could have been a really cool dynamic and also introduced a little bit more emotional weight into the film, especially seeing like getting into Carol's kind of character.
Yeah.
um but yeah, the Skrull stuff was pretty unremarkable, I would say.
Yeah. No, I
uh
mean, do you even remember that like most of them died on that planet? Because like this, like I was watching the movie and it ended, and I was like, oh yeah, those scrolls died. Like it totally just like washed over me for the rest of the like because it's this moment where Kamal is like, we can't just leave them behind as the planets
mhm.
get. I think the evil woman is sucking all the air out, and
Yep.
so so the movie, this is how like rushed the movie is. It opens with her on some moon
Mhm.
crushing some rock for some reason. It happens to have the bangle in it that she needs. She's got
Yep.
like what looks like Ronan's staff,
Right.
and then the next time we see her, she's negotiating with the scrolls, and she's like, okay, well, you sent the Annihilator to us, which we don't know what that means at this point.
Yeah.
That she's the Annihilator, which is Captain Marvel, and so she's like, "You've betrayed us. We're gonna take your air." And then she uses this staff to like open this like
Portal.
portal
Yep.
in the sky to take all the air to her. And I'm just like, how does that? Where did she get that?
Yeah.
How does that work?
Yeah, I don't know. It's again, yeah, that just I think speaks to the rushed nature and chopped up like version of this film that we have. It's just very kind of all over the place. Um yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's
Well, I'm
like
convinced.
the
I'm convinced that the second act of this movie is missing because there's the point where. Well, first I'll ask you, what did you think of that singing planet scene? Because there's two really like out of this world wacky scenes. It's the Flurkins and it's the singing planet scene, which based on some reviews is either where you're going to be all in or all out.
you're right. Yeah.
So I didn't mind the singing planet, honestly. I thought it was
I
kind of
liked it.
fun.
I liked
Yeah,
it. It
I
was a
thought it was kind
fun,
of fun.
creative thing. Like, it was so different from what we've ever seen before. I think it could have been explored way more. Like, I think it was way
I'm
too,
glad
like,
it
in and
didn't.
out.
I'm glad it didn't go on for too long. I feel like they played
I
it for
think it
just the
could have
right amount of
used
time.
maybe, like, one more scene really, like, leaning into the whole their languages singing, basically. Like,
Yeah.
but any more than that, like, I definitely don't think it could have been, like, half the movie or even a movie in and of itself. But,
Yeah. But
um,
anyways, after the singing planet, when they have the fight and
yeah,
then they escape, their ship, like the Marvels, their ship like crashes onto this like desert, almost like Tatooine looking planet.
right.
And then they all get out and they start an argument, and then they quickly resolve that argument, and then we cut back to Fury, and all of a sudden they're at Saber in the spaceship with Fury and the family,
Right.
and I'm like,
Hang
they
on.
crash landed on this desert. You made it look like the ship wasn't usable anymore and that they were going
Right,
to be
yeah.
stranded. Like I feel like that was the point originally where the band disbanded. You know how always in those group
Yeah.
movies they
Yep.
always have that, I'm not like you in this and I'm
Mhm.
not your friend, and they go their separate ways and then they have to come back together. I feel like on that planet there was something that happened there where
Yep.
they eventually went their separate ways, and then the reshoot was the quick resolve of like, I'm sorry, and
Yeah,
I
they
and
forgot.
yeah, and then they just
Yeah.
like moved on.
Well, there's other stuff too that's like I'm fairly certain I remember this correctly. I'm pretty sure they just explain away in dialogue the fact that their swapping thing is just fixed now, right? Like, am
Dude, I
I
didn't.
misremembering?
I did not get it. The swapping thing. This is kind of where I said that it kind of becomes inconsistent, is
Right.
because at the beginning they show that because the villain has the bracelet or the bangle and the
Yeah.
staff, it's like gone to Miss Marvel's bangle, and it's like intertwined their powers
Yeah.
somehow, because I guess they're all light related. So the switching happens like frequently at the beginning,
Yeah.
and then it kind of like will come and go, and then they have this like training montage where it's like, oh, it shows that they're trying to master it,
Yeah.
and then by the end of the montage it looks like they had mastered it, and
Mhm.
then in their next fight they're
They
acting confused
immediately
again as to
screw it
why
up.
they're switching. And then there's this like long period where Captain Marvel is just like flying and taking out all these ships, and there's no switching going on,
Yeah.
and it was just very much like, so like you
What's
controlled it
going
or you
on
haven't,
here?
like what's
Yeah.
going on here. And then
Well,
yeah, the
and
villain
like
gets the other bangle and it stops.
and like this just made me think of this. Like, why doesn't the villain like swap around with them either? Because the two bangles are like tied together supposedly, right? Like, shouldn't she
It's a good
theoretically be
point.
swapping places with them if they're all light based and everything? Very like quickly explained away that whole thing.
Yeah, was
Um,
the villain light based? I don't remember enough of
well,
her
but
to
like
know.
the bangle was right because like you would.
Right.
It's the same as Kamala's. I don't know.
Well, come
It's
on, in the show again in the show they
I
explain
can't, man.
that
I can't.
Kamala's powers were always within her, the bangle just brought them out.
Right. Okay. So
So
yeah,
you
true
can go find that
true power
episode
was
to get
friendship
that.
all along is the type of thing that's happening here.
That plot hole is fixed in that
Yeah.
episode of Miss Marvel.
Um yeah, that it's very inconsistent. I did like the premise of that montage of like, okay, it's a very very loose like scrappy version of this type of through line of like, okay, they have a problem, they like we get a training montage and they've mastered it and now they've got a handle on it, right?
Yeah.
Like especially if we didn't get that one scene on top of that like one ship where they kind of stumble a little bit, if we just jump straight to that final fight where they're like, that was a really cool fight scene. I thought it was very well like choreographed and everything, very creative of
Yeah.
using all of their powers together and everything.
All the fight scenes were great. I thought all the fight scenes were great.
Yeah,
They were a
I
lot of
think
fun. They
so.
were dynamic. They had a lot of energy to them.
Exactly. Yeah. Um, Although I do have one kind of maybe small gripe, big gripe. Why in every time they fight Darben, I think her name is, like she always blocks with her one arm, literally aim anywhere else. Like that
Yes.
that should not be a problem. I don't know. Maybe that's just me. Yeah.
I can see that. Yeah.
Yeah. Um where how did we even get here? We were talking about the scrolls at one point.
Oh
You
yeah, the Korean
mentioned,
skulls.
yeah, the that whole part is brushed under the rug very swiftly as well of the whole like
Yeah,
an
Valkyrie just
entire
shows up for
planet.
like 2 minutes, and
Yeah, it's
apparently
like
her
it
and
goes
Marvel are
dark really
friends.
quickly, but then it's like, okay, back to fun space adventure type thing.
Yeah, yeah, you
Um,
forget about it pretty quickly.
yeah, the more and more you just kind of analyze this film, and like art and films are made to be like analyzed and critiqued and everything, right? Like, I know some people are just gonna kind of shrug it off and be like, what did you expect? Like, it's just a Marvel film. Just turn your brain off. Like, I appreciate the sentiment behind that of like just enjoying it for what it is and going in and
Yeah,
having a fun time. But I also don't think you can necessarily use that as a like excuse all. Like, I think you can still, they're not mutually exclusive. Like, you can have gone in and had a fun time, but then also
yeah.
be like, wow, woof, what a film. That was not good.
Well, that's the thing, right? Is that if you want to go do that, go do that. Like, no one's stopping you. Have
Yeah.
a great time. I hope you love it.
Yeah.
But if you're here on YouTube, this is just what you do.
Yeah.
like this, we can't watch movies that way. So that's why we're
Right.
here.
Yeah. Well, and then there's like the extremes as well, right? Like, there's
Yeah,
people like Dan said it in particular really well of like, I think there's a certain subsect of people and reviewers in like specifics that would have like bashed this film regardless. So because
yeah.
that's just kind of the brand of what their review channel is or whatever. We don't have to go too much into that, but just like I think you can still like analyze the film and recognize that not all of this is good,
Yeah.
and still have had a fun time, and also like bring that in going forward with their other projects and be like, okay, like I had fun with this one, but like guys, you got to fix up your writing and your like pacing and everything, right?
Yeah.
Like
I
it's
mean,
not.
like it's all subjective too, and it all comes through your perspective. Like I had someone because I complained about Captain Marvel and the villain in this.
Hmm.
They allude to a history that caused a rivalry,
Hmm.
but I never felt their rivalry. I kind of just felt like it was one sided. I felt like Captain Marvel didn't give a crap about this villain, and this villain was just like trying to get her attention most of the
Well,
movie.
yeah, I actually thought the point in the end where they like Carol kind of apologizes to her and everything. I thought that would have been a great, I don't know how you write it to get the whole space tear type thing happening, but like I was really excited to see her have like a heel turn and then they all like work together to fix like her planet or whatever, right?
Yeah,
Like I thought that would have been a nice kind of subversion a little bit. I felt like the fake out was a little cheap.
but it's more
Like
fun to have her blow up and open the multiverse, right?
yeah, well, and then you also bring in a bunch of other like plot holes of like
Yeah.
why does she like incinerate with both bangles? Is it because Kamala had that power in her all along?
Right.
Or
Yeah.
like they each wear one, I guess, and you do the kind of Guardians Volume 1 thing where they're holding hands and
They
doing
all
all
hold
of the
hands.
yeah.
They
Um
recycled Ronin. Why not recycle that? I mean,
yeah,
come
exactly, right?
on.
Yeah.
But yeah.
We're 42 minutes in and we actually haven't talked about the ending and the mid-credits scene. So I think
Oh yeah, that's true.
we should talk about that because I think that's probably some of the highlights of this film that this film offers, I would say. Um like
In
what were
some
your thoughts
ways,
on those? Like they're pretty light. Like it's not super insane levels of like
I mean,
stuff there to work with,
as
but
far as the ending goes, with like they blow up the villain, she opens up the multiverse, and was there a reason why Monica had to go close it from the other side? Why couldn't she have closed it within
from
their
their
reality? I
side,
was kind
yeah.
of confused by that. She's like, I gotta close it. I can't come back. I was like, why can't you just do it from the other side? Why do you have to get trapped in there? Like that kind of was lost on me. And then it's like this
Yeah.
sacrifice of Monica, and I couldn't care less. I'm sorry. It was so. I just didn't feel it. It wasn't built up. And then Carol's all sad. And then she's moving into the old house of Monica and her mom.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering, like, how do you have so many boxes? You lived in a spaceship. I don't know where you're getting all this stuff
Yeah.
from as you're moving into
Or
this
are the
big
cons
house.
moving in there too because their house got trashed
They
in
yeah, I
Jersey?
was
Like
maybe that's what they maybe I misinterpreted that. Maybe the cons are moving in there. I don't know. I
maybe,
can't
but
remember.
like I don't know, even the logistics of that of like you're going all the way where were they in Pennsylvania? That
Wait, no, because
house?
she had the dish from the Prince of the Singing Planet, and Kamala's mom was commenting on the good quality of it. So it
Right.
was Captain Marvel stuff. So she's moving into the house, and yeah, she's like now best friends with Kamala Khan, and they're like, we'll see Monica again one day, and it just felt like this really like abrupt kind of like
Wrap up
emotional,
kinda.
impactful ending that just did not impact me.
Yeah.
So and then they talk about Kamala talks about like basically getting a team together, and then out of nowhere, Kate Bishop from Hawkeye, hope you've been
Mhm.
watching that show. Uh Kate Bishop comes home, and it was cute that Kamala Khan was sitting there and recited the exact same dialogue that Nick Fury recited at the end of Iron Man to Tony. It was cute to get the Young Avengers started.
Yeah. It's such a like cute thing and like very nice like fan servicey type thing that also does help set up in some capacity for the future, right? Young Avengers and everything. But like the second you start analyzing it of like if you haven't seen the Hawkeye show, you're like, who is this
Yeah, who's
character?
this person?
Um, and then just the meta nature of that whole scene of like, hang on, how would Kamala have been able to like set that up? Because like that's just like a out of universe type thing, right? Like such
Yeah.
a like fourth wall break. I don't know. It did appreciate it. That's like for like the diehard fans of like, oh yeah, that's a nice nod, right?
Yeah. And that's another thing too that we didn't really talk about is like there's really no character arcs in this movie. They're just kind of character through lines because you start off with Monica and Captain Marvel. They have Monica's mad at Captain Marvel, and
Mhm.
then she's not. and it's not really explained how she's not anymore. And then you have Kamala's mom, who is freaking out. She doesn't want her daughter to be a superhero. She doesn't want her to go with these other powerful beings into space. And the
Mhm.
whole time she's like resistant to it. And then the next time she sees her daughter, she's just like, "You were born to do
It's
this. You were meant
okay.
to do this." And it's like, how did you get there, mom?
Yeah.
You just started here and you ended here, but we didn't get to see how. And
Mhm.
so it's like now Kamala's recruiting other super beings, and her family's totally cool with it.
Yeah,
So
I guess.
there you go with
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I don't know. There's a couple moments. Yeah, it just doesn't have, it's very slapstick together, and like there's too many ideas on the plate, I think, for any of them to work fully to their like maximum potential. You would need like a much more in-depth through line for the whole Monica Carol thing, right? Like that's just kind of explained away. You would need
Yeah.
way more involvement from Kamala and her mom, um, which at that point you would think would be more in line with like a season two of the show. Um, I don't know. It like, and especially like while I did appreciate the short runtime, it's also kind of one of its biggest faults is because there's just too much at a breakneck speed going on, and there's not enough time to kind of go in depth with anything or resolve anything in sort of any big meaningful way, I don't think.
Yeah. I mean, they
Um
could have cut the little side story going on with Nick Fury and the what are these
the
eggs being planted
Oh
around by
dude,
the
and that was so
Flurkins?
quick too,
It was
right?
so out of nowhere.
Out of nowhere. Yeah. Deus Ex Flurkin to the rescue,
Okay,
getting
can we
all
talk
those
about that
people off
scene
the
for
ship.
a little bit though? Um, what did you think of it? I need to know because
I mean,
my group of people I saw this with, it was very split as
yo,
to whether or
really?
not you like this scene or not.
It was kind of a like head shaky thing of like, oh my god, we're doing this, aren't we? um it felt very like at the last minute, like we need to save all these people in a really like bonkers way.
Yeah.
Um yeah, and I'm also not a big cat person, so I was pretty immune to the cuteness of the whole situation.
I
Yeah.
mean, like for me, I thought it was really fun.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
thought it was kind of smart, but also flawed. Of like, okay, so we can't get all these people off of the ship. Luckily, the Flurkin just happened to lay all these eggs, and now we've got all these other Flurkins. So let's get these newborn Flurkins to eat the crew, and just put the Flurkins on the ship and get them out. And I was like, if someone was in the writing room, like, how are we going to get these people out if we can't use escape pods? That's kind of an outside of the box, interesting way of doing it.
Absolutely.
Um, Win has been guaranteed that a Flurkin's going to barf someone up, though,
Yeah.
because I mean, in
When
Captain
was it
Marvel,
introduced that they had a pocket dimension? Am I
that's
missing that?
yes, yes, that's so true. But it's like in Captain Marvel, Flurkins ate people. We never saw them come back. So I mean, we saw that once in this movie. So I guess that's what they're basing it off of. But what's the guarantee that that's going to happen when they get down to
Yeah.
Earth? The second thing, and this didn't work for one of the people that I saw this with, she said this is the thing that really made it fall into it feels like a parody mode. Is they're playing
Mm.
memories from cats over the entire scene of all these cats
Oh, is
running
that what that
around.
song's from?
They're playing memories from
Oh.
Cats the musical.
Oh my god. What a choice. Oh my goodness. Wow, that brings a whole level of dimension that I had not had privy.
I
Um
kind of enjoyed the wackiness of it though. It was
Yeah,
so
like
wacky.
as a creative concept, I very much appreciated it. It was really cool. I do love just the absurdity of the fact that they all land in New York still though. Like is there
Oh
some
yeah.
sort of gravitational pull like
Just once can they land in like Wisconsin or something?
yeah.
It's
Yeah,
just like
exactly,
somewhere
right?
that they're not supposed to be.
It's ridiculous. All right. To kind of start wrapping things up, I would say the mid-credit scene.
Right.
What did that do
Yep.
for you?
The mid-credit scene was interesting. Um because I was shocked. I was shocked. I will
Mhm.
admit it. Did you get spoiled
I did not.
online?
Thank the
Oh, I know,
stars.
right? I know, right? So I'm sitting there. I'm eating my Mike and Ike's. My brother and my cousin, who I saw this with, did get spoiled, so they're just waiting for me
Ah,
to react to
man.
this thing. They're waiting. They're just looking at me. They're like, "Oh my goodness, here it comes!" And I have no idea what's about to come. So Monica's sitting on a hospital bed, and her
Yeah.
mom is there. And I was like, "Okay, she's in the other universe. The
Mhm.
multiverse opened up. She got trapped on the other side, so she's in a multiverse now where her mom lives." So I'm eating my Mike and Ike's. I'm just, just okay. She's in another universe, and then this blue hand behind her kind of trails behind, and I'm like, okay, that's interesting. And then freaking Beast from X-Men is there taking her vitals, and I
Kelsey
like,
Grammer's Beast, to be
yes,
specifically.
yes, the original one, and I
Yeah.
dropped my Mike and Ike's. I was like, that's Beast. What's Beast
Wow.
doing here? And then you get that shot of Monica's mom is actually a variant or of, and she's an X-Men character. And you got
Yeah.
the X door in the background, and they mentioned Charles. He says Charles will be
Mhm.
down or whatever, and I was like, Charles, I know who Charles is. That's awesome. And the X door was there, and I had a moment of like, holy crap, they did that.
Yeah.
And then I kind of like sat back, and then I was kind of like, oh man, in this movie though, like, because it's been something that like we've been waiting for and waiting for and waiting for, and where are
Mhm.
the X-Men, and where are the X-Men? And then it happens, and after it like settled, it kind of felt lackluster to me, to be honest, and
Okay.
underwhelming, because I was just kind of like, oh, they did it in this post-credit scene of a movie that I think is kind of sloppy and poor, and it doesn't
Right.
really connect very well to this. And then I also looked around in the audience, and I was kind of sad because I went to a 1:20 p.m. showing on Saturday, so it's not like
Okay.
it was opening night.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
was probably like maybe 60% full when I got there. When the credits started, it probably went down to like 40 or 30%.
Mhm.
And it just kind of felt like it should have been this moment, with the fandom of like, we've been waiting for
Totally.
this collectively. And
Yep.
my it didn't have that energy to it for me
Mhm.
personally, right? So as far as like, and we had seen like Charles Xavier in Doctor Strange and Multiverse of Madness, so it's not like we haven't seen X-Men characters, but
Yeah.
this was like the first big time where it's like X-Men is here.
Mhm.
And it I wish it had been in a more uh just a more, what's the word I'm
Grandiose
looking
kinda way.
for, grandiose movie, I guess. Yeah,
Right. Yeah, it
one
feels
that's
like
because
something that maybe would get
this movie
tacked
is pretty
onto, like,
disposable.
Quantumania or something, or, like, Multiverse of Madness, right?
Yeah, something like that, because this movie's kind of disposable. It is to me.
Yeah.
It's
Well, it like, kind of how I said earlier, it feels like one of the more, like, contained movies, right? Like,
yeah.
that's how I feel anyway. Um, yeah, it brings up a lot of questions, and not that that's a bad thing. It's just, like, it also is a very interesting way because, like, you mentioned Multiverse of Madness. Like, is this that, like, the Illuminati universe? And is it, like, pre-Doctor Strange events where Charles gets, like, like, or
It can't be that universe, because that Monica Rambeau was or not Monica Rambeau. So Monica Rambeau's
Maria?
mom was
Right.
Captain Marvel
That's
in that
true.
universe, and she
That
died.
is true, which
And
would
this is
also
another
explain the different
variant
costume.
who,
Yes.
which, by the way, good for Monica's mom. I mean, it sucks for the one that got the cancer in
Well,
our main MCU universe,
right,
but
yeah.
she's got some cool variants flying around out there.
Totally, yeah. Yeah, that does clear that up. But then, like, the bigger thing, I think, it's very interesting that they seem to be kind of introducing the X-Men by way of, like, multiverse slash
Hmm.
original X-Men. Like, I thought the, like, first answer, like, the most logical answer would have been to just do clean slate from the start. Um, but that doesn't necessarily seem to be what they're doing. I think they're going to be leaning much more on the pre-established characters and everything, whether they get, like, everyone back for, like, Secret Wars or whatever or what have you.
Yeah,
Um, or maybe it'll be explored in, like, Deadpool 3 or something.
that's kind of where my mind went. I wonder if Monica Rambeau is going to appear in Deadpool 3.
Could, yeah. Um, and yeah, it's just a very interesting choice because, like, most of the like multiversal cameo type stuff with like Multiverse of Madness and No Way Home and everything, is they didn't feel as integral to the kind of overall story, right? Like, and I
Mm,
mean, this is one post credit scene, but like the way they're going, it does kind of give that vibe of like setup for like contribution towards that main storyline, right? That's the kind of read I got anyway. Um, whether that'll actually pay off is a whole other thing, but yeah, it's just a very interesting way to like start things, because like I don't know, in my layman's mind I would be like, well, yeah, just do a clean slate and then you do a couple like legacy cameos throughout other movies, right? um
yeah,
I didn't think it would be as integral as they might be setting it up to be, so it'd be very interesting to see how that plays going forward. um, but yeah, it was a cool cameo, cool credit scene. But yeah, I do agree with you, Zach. Like maybe not the film to tag it on, although I mean within the context of everything, like if I mean I guess you could maybe swap a character out in place of Monica and not have her be the one that's stuck there.
yeah,
Um Again, it'll be really interesting to see how all of this plays out having looked back on it and seeing how integral Monica's character is going to be going forward, because again, like you said, she really hasn't been that established a character. She was literally in only one other season of television,
yeah,
in which she was a side character as well. uh so like there's not that weight to like, oh damn, like one of these characters is like stuck and we have to go save them. Like it does, it weird to say, but it doesn't feel like a high priority thing to do, you know?
yeah.
um
No, they're just flat out acting like she's dead.
yeah, well,
With
yeah,
putting her picture
basically.
away, and yeah, they're
Yeah,
like mourning her. She's dead.
yeah,
Which I do want to bring up really quickly, Monica, actually, for a minute.
sure.
Did you understand her powers? I felt like she was the most um unexplained, inconsistent character with powers. Especially, I mean, at the beginning of the movie, this really stuck out to me. She's outside in space working on something, and she's in a space like an astronaut suit, right? And then they swap powers, and all of a sudden she's out in space on the moon. And I'm like, oh my gosh, she's gonna die. But no, she's completely fine in space. So I was like, well, why on earth was she in a astronaut suit if she's fine in space? And then I realized, oh, it's because the writers needed to get Kamala in that space suit, and that's literally the only reason why they had her in an astronaut suit. And I thought that was so stupid. And then there's a line at the end of the movie where she's talking to Captain Marvel, and she's like, oh, I've done stuff today that I've never done before. And I was like, yeah, you're telling me. I don't know how you're doing any of this stuff. Like, you're going invisible, you're doing this, you're doing that. Like,
Yeah,
you're just suddenly flying because of black girl magic yelling at
yeah,
you. Like, like she's
yeah.
just doing all this stuff.
Yeah, well, and like at the end of the movie too, she's just completely out of a spacesuit and like in space in going to other
Yes.
like multiverses and everything, right? Like
Yes.
yeah, it's more of a like PPE type thing. Like you work for Sword, like you got to put your PPE on
you
when you're
you
going
have
out
to
there.
wear it regardless of
Yep,
powers.
regardless. Maybe maybe that's in the contract. I don't know. Um, yeah, that's definitely a glaringly obvious thing. Also, just kind of talking briefly, or like connecting back briefly to our talk of cameos and whatnot, it feels like the Valkyrie thing was supposed to be again one of those big like audience cheer moments, but it just kind of fell completely flat in my theater. It was like very quiet, and it was
Yeah.
like it also felt very weird, like just seeing, especially if you're not as familiar with Valkyrie, like seeing this random lady in a suit show up in the middle of space, and then it's like, okay, um yeah, that was a very weird moment, it felt like, and also a very easily like tie up a loose end of like, okay, what are we going to do with all these scrolls now, right? Like
Yeah. Also,
that was a weird moment.
if you're doing refugees for scrolls, couldn't you offer that to Dabar as well? Like, hey, your planet's dying. Sorry about that. But hey, do you want to come? Like, we have a we can help you out.
Yeah,
It's just
I yeah. Lots of
One of those
problems with
things you
this
just kind
movie.
of have to buy into the fantasy of it all, of course, and
Yeah.
it's fun. It is
Or
fun.
if you can't, then hey, that's all right.
Yeah,
Um,
for sure.
on to the next one, right? Yeah, I think that's a pretty good spot to leave it for this one. It's a very messy film,
Hmm.
but one, and I mean, especially considering the amount of divisiveness, it actually is something I'm eager to go back and watch to see how it ages for me in terms of
Yeah.
how much I like it. Right, like I feel like I'm probably not going to get nearly the amount of fun I got out of it the first time. Um, so it'll be interesting. Yeah, that's where we'll wrap it up for this episode of the No Score Review Show. Thank you all so much for watching and listening. Please let us know your thoughts on the movie down in the comments below, or you can tag us on the socials. Um, and Zach also did his own review. So he might have touched on stuff that we didn't in this video. So be sure to go check that out. I'll probably try and tag it at the end of this video or put in the description.
Yeah, thanks,
Um,
man.
yeah, thank you so much for coming on to the show again. Where can the people find you?
Yeah, thanks for having me, man. I really enjoy coming on, and it was great to do this again. And you can find me at Zach Milne Talks Movies on YouTube. Just type in Zach Milne Talks Movies, and you'll find it there. And I'm also on Twitter or X. Now you know what? It's Twitter. I'm not gonna. I'm not gonna. I'm not confiding to Elon Musk's rules. Twitter at Milne Movies, Instagram, TikTok, all the socials that you need to or that are required to do this thing on YouTube. So you
Right.
can just find me anywhere.
Type in Milne movies, and I'm sure Zach will pop up.
I'll pop up, just look for this face.
And then, do you have any recommendations? I'm trying to bring this little micro segment back. Anything you've been
Yes.
reading, playing, watching? Want to recommend?
So this is a movie that came out this weekend as well that I honestly was not I was aware of it, but I did not know that it was coming to Netflix. And I feel like because it's on Netflix, it's gonna get forgotten. The Killer. David
Hell
Fincher's
yeah!
The Killer. I just finished watching it this morning.
Fantastic.
Really enjoyed it. It's bleak, it's disturbing, but it's got some great dialogue, some great performances, and yeah, some pretty brutal action, but some fun action sequences as well.
Don't go in expecting like a action shoot 'em up type assassin
No.
movie. It's very cerebral. It's
Yeah.
like David Fincher, so I think you'll probably kind of know what you're getting into. Um,
It's kind of repetitive a little bit. It has this kind of like repetitive feel to it as you go
some
along,
of it,
but
yeah. I found it very creative throughout. I think it
mhm,
explored the side of like the assassin world that we don't usually get to. I think we usually
yeah.
kind of, at least in the Western, like more popular Hollywood cinema we see regarding this genre, it's way more like shoot 'em up, like hand to hand combat. It feels way
Yeah.
more methodical and clinical, which is
It's
really
very
cool to see.
immersive too, yeah.
Yeah. No, I really liked that. Funnily enough, Netflix was not the way I was able to see it because I just don't have a subscription to that anymore, and instead had to go to the theater. I wanted to go see it in theaters, but
Oh, so
got
it
to
is
see it
played
on
in
the
some
big screen.
theaters.
Yeah, yeah,
Nice, man.
limited screenings, but yeah,
Okay,
it is
fair
getting a
enough. I
limited
saw it on
run.
Netflix.
Yeah. But yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. I definitely recommend that one as well. Cool. You can find me wherever you're listening to or watching this episode of the No Score Review Show. I recently did a recap on the Vancouver International Film Festival with a couple of my friends who also went. It was my first time going. It's kind of like the antithesis of subject matter to like MCU popcorn movie type things. So if you want to learn about some new movies that came out this year that are like smaller, just like more in the vein of like just serious dramas, character pieces, really out there cinema. Go check that out. I also did a couple reviews. Weird to mention them in the same sentence, but for Killers of the Flower Moon and Five Nights at Freddy's. So there's a real dichotomy of genres going on there.
There's a double
Um,
feature.
double feature. That's your Saturday sorted. Um, yeah, go check out those. Those are my most recent. I will also be hopefully getting. I mean, I say hopefully. I will also be doing a review with Zach on Loki season 2. So be sure to check that out if you haven't already. That kind of the season 2 kind of wrapped up the same day as the Marvels coming out. So we're getting a good little push of Marvel content for the end of the year. This is also actually the last Marvel thing because Echo got pushed. The last
January.
Marvel
Yep.
thing for this year. So yeah, go check those things out. Otherwise, you can find me on all the socials and on Letterboxd at No Score or at No Score Reviews. Zach, thank you once more for joining me this episode. And thank you all for watching and listening. We'll see you in the next review. Bye bye.